Hi everyone, my name is Gregor Suttie and welcome to day 3 of the Azure Back to School community event organised by my good friend Dwayne Natwick. Big thanks Dwayne for inviting me to take part. It's always a pleasure to record and just give something back to the Azure community. And this is another great initiative for the Azure people to take part in around the world. The content is a mix of blog articles and videos that are provided by everyone in the community, so thanks to everyone who's taken part. The website is azureBackToSchool.tech and the hashtag is #AzureBackToSchool. The site's going to be a lot of cool content, lots to enjoy. So hopefully I'll see you back here on September the 1st where it kicks off, and for my video on Azure certification preparation on September the 3rd. The hashtag for this again is AzureBackToSchool. So my session for this event is titled Azure Certification Preparation. And here is a quick slide about me. So today I've got 5 slides worth of content on Azure Certification Prep, and I'll be covering each one in depth. So let's not hang around. Before we go any further, it's worth mentioning why I think the exams are worth sitting. Azure is an enormous beast to try to learn everything about it. It changes daily, and keeping up with change is really difficult. The reason I feel the exams are a good idea to tackle is you will learn a ton of information while you're studying for them, and the exams help basically join up the dots between Azure services, and it makes the jigsaw easier to complete. Certainly it does for me. Right, time for the top 5, coming up next. So the first port of call is the actual official exam page for the exams that you're interested in. I always recommend to people, if it's your first exam, go for the Azure Fundamentals exam, which is the AZ-900. So read those pages carefully. There may be recent updates to what's in the exam. It also may be retiring soon, so definitely make sure you carefully read the official page and make sure that the exam is the one you want to study for and then sit. There's nothing worse than studying for the wrong exam or studying for an exam that's about to change or expire. And within the main site there are links to each exam. I can't stress this enough, so make sure, once again, read the content in here very carefully. This area lists the topics covered in the exam and what you will need to know. So on the screen here you can see I've got links for the main site, I've got links for the Azure Administrator exam, I've got links to Microsoft Learn, which we'll come back to, the links to the actual Azure Fundamentals exam, which is the 4th link here. That's the number 1 exam I think everyone should start with. I've also got a link to a new thing called Microsoft Learn TV, which is in beta at the minute, but more on that shortly. And last but not least is the Microsoft Exam Journey, which is basically a PDF of the different exams and kind of the journey through sitting all the exams. So on slide number 5 we have community content. Community content comes in all sorts of different various formats, but one of the number 1 things which I like is the Azure study guides. So I've put up some links here. And there's lots of people in the community who contribute to Azure study guides. These are people who look at the exam official pages, look at the content that you will be examined on, and find links to Microsoft Docs or videos or any kind of resource which will help you learn the exams. So these are really good. There's also build59s.com, which is a website written by Christopher Peishman, I think his name is. And he has loads of really good certification links. Lots of good content in there, so definitely check that out. And there's also a new area of Azure Charts called Learning, so there's azurecharts.com/learning. Definitely worth checking out. Absolutely go and look at these resources. They're all really, really good. They will help. But definitely take a look at study guides from people in the community. Slide number 4 is the Azure Docs. Nothing better than the actual official documentation for Azure. There is no better place. The Azure documentation is up to date. It's very, very good. Cannot stress how good this landing page is just to get you started. Definitely check out the Azure Docs. If I'm looking for anything, that's the first port of call. And a little tip here is if you're Googling or Bing, using Bing to search for something, add the word Docs at the end. So typically I'll do something like Azure Storage Docs, and at the end, because I've tagged in Docs, you usually get links to the actual official documentation. That's a little tip, but definitely check out the Microsoft Azure Docs. Slide number 3 is some training companies, so I always like to link in training companies where you can go and find out more. So part of your certification prep is going away and looking at official study guides. And here are a couple here. There's the Skylines Academy. I always like to mention them. They're very nice people and their stuff is really, really good. There's quite a lot of free content on their website too. Pluralsight's another site that I use regularly to learn and try and keep up to date. And Udemy. I've used Udemy from the very start. So there's some study guides on there and some content on all the Azure exams. Scott Duffy's got a lot of really good stuff in there. So check that out. On slide number 2, we have Azure Charts Learning. I'll cover Azure Charts Learning and more as we go, but I wanted to point this out as one of my top 5 Azure certification and prep learning resources. It's fairly new, and to do it justice, I'll demo this in just a little bit. And number 1, we have exam tips. So here I'm just going to go over some exam tips for actually on the day and some advice. Hopefully this will make some sense and resonance. So let's talk about taking a proctored exam, which is sitting an exam in your house or in your office. There's some rules which you need to adhere to when taking an exam from your office or your home. So there is no bit of paper allowed for taking notes. So if you need to take notes, then there is a way to do this using the on-screen test software. So try and get familiar with this as soon as you can. No one is allowed to enter the room at any time during your exam, and you certainly can't leave the room either. You're also not allowed to read the questions out loud. You're not allowed to cover your face. You're not allowed to leave the webcam perimeter box for any reason, and if you do so, you run the risk of failing. You also have to take photos of your identification, which is usually your driver's license or your passport. And you've got to take photos of the desk you're sitting at, behind where you're sitting, to the left and to the right of where you're going to take the exam. And the rules are here for people to read, so be sure you know what you can and cannot do, otherwise you run the risk of an instant failure, which would not be fun. A couple of tips here: make sure your PC laptop's charged, arrive half an hour early, go through your identification steps as soon as you can, because you don't want to have to take time redoing the photographs. That can be a little bit unsettling as your exam time approaches, and you don't want to be flustered before the exam begins. So back on slide 2, I mentioned Azure Charts. So this is the Azure Charts website. It's basically azurecharts.com. So it basically says, welcome to Azure Charts, interactive visual guide to Azure Cloud's current state. So you can basically use the top menu to navigate your way through the cloud. So as you can see, we've got solutions, stories, topics, learning, timelines, instances, regions and services. But let's talk about Azure Learning. So I'm going to click on the Learning link here. So we can discover published Azure Learning modules and learning paths for services of your interest. So this links into Microsoft Learn again. So if you're looking to learn one of the services, this is your place to come. So say you want to let's look at the bot service, for example. So if I click on the bot service and I look at the drop down here, these are links to units, modules and learning paths within Microsoft Learn. So if I look at this one here, it's getting started with AI on Azure, and that's to do with the bot service. If I clear the selection, say I want to learn about Service Bus. So if I want to look at Azure Service Bus, click on Azure Service Bus. Again, go up to the top. 5 modules have been found, as you can see up here. And I can choose, let's go for Architect, Message, Brokering and Service Applications in Azure. And if I click on that, it will take me off to Microsoft Learn in a new window. And it will talk about courses and learning on Azure Service Bus. So that, in a nutshell, is azurecharts.com/learning. Go and have a look at it. It's really worth having a look. And this has been developed by a Microsoft Cloud architect. Really, really excellent resource. Every time I come back here, there's something new. So let's continue looking at exam tips. And for this, I'm going to look at some online content. So let's take a look at Microsoft Edge. First thing I want to call out is the fact that I use collections in Microsoft Edge. What are collections, you might ask? So if I go to here and go collections. So basically if I browse to websites, I can use collections on any device. So for example, if I want to start a learning collection, I'll get started here. And I have a learning collection, I have paid training, I have an Azure Exams collection, a GitHub Actions collection and a community collection. So let me show you what the learning collection looks like. So if I click on learning, these are all the links that I usually use when I'm talking or doing talks about Azure Learning. So these are very good for doing exams. So I've got Microsoft Learn, I've got the Microsoft Learn certification, I have the certification self-assessment tools for build59s.com, really a good resource. I have some training assets, Azure Overview, Cloud Adoption Framework, AzureCitadel.com, the Azure Charts, which we were talking about earlier, Azure Tips and Tricks even from Michael Crump, the Azure DevOps Demo Generator. But let's take a look at what you're going to do when you book your first exam. So let's do a search for Microsoft exams. And we'll just click on this Browse Certification and Exams link. Okay, so here's a list of all the different exams, and let's go for the roles. Let's look at the roles instead. So these are all the different kind of job roles associated with Azure. So I'm just going to search for AZ-900, which is the Azure Fundamentals. And this is the exam I always recommend you get started with. So let's take a look at, I think these are both the same, let's take a look at this one here. So this is the AZ-900 webpage. And let's have a look at the certification details. So you can earn a certification if you take one exam. And the skills being measured is the important part. So you need to really focus on this part here. So let's have a look at this. Let's just right click and download this skills measured. So this is a skills measured page for the AZ-900. I'm just going to read this out in red. This document contains the skills measured on the exams associated with this certification. It does not include any upcoming or recent changes that have been made to those skills. For more information about upcoming or recent changes, see the associated exam details page. So that's something you want to keep an eye out for. This exam has probably been updated recently. I think they're updated every 2 months. So you need to be careful that some of these might no longer be here. Some of these skills being measured might have changed. Moving on. So what you tend to find is the exams split into maybe 3 or 4 areas. So this one is split up into designing cloud concepts, describe cloud concepts, 15 to 20%. It's also got describe core Azure services, 30 to 35%. So that looks like it's quite a big chunk of the actual exam. And we've got describe security, privacy, compliance and trust, which is 25 to 30%. So between this part and this part, that takes up roughly about 55 to 60% of the exam. Further down we have describe Azure pricing, service level agreements and lifecycle, which is 20 to 25%. So this is what you're going to be asked on. So these are all the different areas that you need to kind of study on. First thing I would always do is Google AZ-900 study guide, because someone will have taken this link, for example, here, and looked up for links on the Microsoft Docs on this subject, and then this subject, and then this subject, and kind of went through this whole document, and hopefully kept their study guides up to date. That's kind of how you get started with that. So let's close that link back down and go back to the official page. So Microsoft are giving us 2 ways to prepare. There's online free learning, which is basically learning paths on Microsoft Learn, and there's instructor-led paid. So let's take a quick look at the online free preparation. So here we have a learning path. So this is basically explore Microsoft Azure Cloud Concepts. It's rated at beginner, and it's the job roles are here. So let's have a quick look at this. So here it's getting started with Azure Fundamentals. It tells you how long it is. It tells you that it is a module, and 0 of 7 units have completed. And basically you just go through all this. So you'll get an introduction, and you also get a knowledge check at the end, which is pretty cool. And this is just some free learning so that you can take this, do a bit of studying, and then hopefully take the exam once you're finished. Really, really good stuff. The AZ-900 exam is really good actually. Really do like it. So if I just close that link back, let's go to the instructor-led / paid. And here it's basically just links to courses that you can pay for. So here are my contact details. If you have any questions, please do reach out to me. Big thanks again to Dwayne Natwick for organising the event. Please check out all the amazing content from every one of the contributors throughout the Azure Back to School event during the month of September. Enjoy the videos. Bye for now.